Welcome to the Invite Health podcast, where our degreed healthcare professionals are excited to offer you the most important health and wellness information you need to make informed choices about your health. You can learn more about the products discussed in each of these episodes and all that Invite Health has to offer at www.invitehealth.com/podcast. First-time customers can use promo code podcast at checkout for an additional 15% off your first purchase. Let's get started.
Have you ever set your keys down and then you can't remember where you put them, or walked into a grocery store and you're standing there going, what did I come in here for? This is a common thing that happens. And when we talk about the aging brain, I want to talk in some detail today about what that actually means. And if you experience things like this, is this actually a sign or a symptom of cognitive decline? Or could this maybe have been brought on because of the acute stress of your day and you have other things that your brain is focused on? So let's talk about the different factors that really play a role into age-related cognitive decline today, and different nutrients that can be incredibly beneficial when it comes to supporting proper neuronal activity within the brain itself. So I am Amanda Williams, MD, MPH, and we know that aging is associated with a gradual decline in cognitive function. And it's common for people who are getting older to find that certain tasks take longer to complete and that their memory and their attention isn't as sharp as it once used to be. Now, this doesn't mean that you have dementia or that you have, the start of Alzheimer's disease, for example. What we do know is that new neurons develop throughout our lives within our brain, but they actually reach their maximum size during our early 20s. And then they begin to very slowly, what we call atrophy or shrink. And this can be exacerbated or sped along by many different things. Certainly stress can make it worse. And most importantly, poor diet, which is why I always say you have the fat brain line and the skinny brain line. And ideally, we want to be in that fat brain line. We want to have a full brain that has the capacity to function the way that we need it to. And where does that come into play when it comes to diet? Well, the more healthy fatty acids that we have in our diet, the correct vitamins and minerals and antioxidants all make a huge difference to optimizing our brain's functions. Now, we know that there are tremendous differences among individuals when it comes to the way that the brain itself actually ages, but we know that there are different causes of memory problems, and we know that there are common conditions that can actually exacerbate that decline in cognitive ability. So certainly we can look at things like stress and anxiety. We can look at depression. We can throw that into the mix as well. Certain, infections. Clearly there's many different medications, especially the anticholinergic drugs that we know can play a role into declining cognitive abilities. I mean, we can even look at statin drugs. We know that those impact your omega-3 status in the body, as well as your CoQ10, which can both impact brain function. So nutrition plays a role, the emotional stresses, substance abuse, thyroid disorder certainly can play a role into why people would have declining cognitive capacity. But one of the things that we don't want to overlook is the difference between mild cognitive decline, aka normal brain aging, versus something that is more profound. And in those situations, definitely we need to have a deeper look at that, maybe with brain imaging, speaking with the neurologist, going through and doing maybe a mini mental status exam, just to assess how the brain is actually reacting and responding in a given time span. Now, when we look at what we can do with natural interventions, we know that there are many different things that have been widely studied when it comes to being beneficial for age-related cognitive decline. Now, I'm going to highlight our Cognition Hx formulation today because this is a combination of many of those widely studied nutrients that have been shown to be very efficacious when it comes to supporting the health of the brain. So in the Cognition Hx formula, this contains phosphatidylserine, so that's a very important and essential fatty acid. It's a phospholipid, so it helps with the actual cellular membrane of the brain, but it's also a key player in the formation of a very important neurotransmitter known as acetylcholine. We kind of consider that to be our primary memory neurotransmitter. So having that phosphatidylserine helps to support proper production of that acetylcholine. This also contains acetyl L-carnitine, which we know is incredibly important. We know that decreasing levels of acetyl L-carnitine have been associated with a decline in cognitive function. So there was actually a meta-analysis where they looked at over 20 different studies showing that supplementation with acetyl L-carnitine could actually improve cognitive deficits in patients who had been diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment or Alzheimer's disease. So acetyl L-carnitine is a modified amino acid, and what it does is it helps to drive the fatty acids to the inside of the cell so they can be utilized for energy production. So it's a very important and critical amino acid. The reason I say it's modified is because once we add that acetyl group to it, it can easily cross the blood-brain barrier, which is what potentiates all of that benefit within the brain itself. And then this particular formulation also contains Huperzine A. Now, Huperzine is a medicinal herb that has been shown to actually inhibit acetylcholinesterase, which is an enzyme that breaks down that very important neurotransmitter I had mentioned, acetylcholine. And we know that patients who have dementia and Alzheimer's, that is one of the main pathogenesis of the development of that cognitive decline. So the more we can kind of bolster up acetylcholine, the better off we are. And this is where the Huperzine has been shown to be very, very beneficial. Now, this particular formulation also contains Ginkgo Biloba. Now, what we know about ginkgo is there have been numerous clinical trials and multiple meta-analysis showing how ginkgo actually had an ability to kind of slow down that cognitive decline. Not only is ginkgo very important when we think about the proper blood flow to the brain, but also the fact that it is a very powerful antioxidant, so it can help to offset much of the reactive oxygen species or oxidative stress that occurs within the brain itself. And then finally, this contains NADH, and NADH also goes by the name of coenzyme 1, not to be confused with CoQ10. But we know that the influence of NADH on health and disease within the central nervous system is really, really important. And in the International Journal of Tryptophan Research, which is quite interesting, just the name of that journal. But tryptophan, we know, is important because that's an amino acid that helps with the production of serotonin and melatonin. So in this particular journal, they were looking at the role of NADH, and there is a real growing body of evidence that nutritional deficiencies are playing this significant role in these different cognitive decline states, as well as neurodegenerative disorders such as Parkinson's disease. And in looking at NADH, they have been able to show that this component, that is a derivative of vitamin B3, which is niacin, plays a key aspect in the metabolic pathway that's involved in the production of NADH. So knowing all of this about NADH, this is a way for scientists to actually see now that it is important in the cells in terms of proper neuronal connection as well as when we think about the neuronal maturation, as well as neuroprotection. So NADH is really quite novel, and to be able to have this in this particular formulation really makes this kind of a well-versed formula. So having the plant-based herbs coming from the ginkgo as well as the Huperzine A, and then having the acetyl L-carnitine, that phosphatidylserine, along with the NADH, gives us a lot of that coverage where we know nutritional deficiencies have played a role. So let's talk a little bit about some of the science behind the aging process and why these nutrients can actually be incredibly beneficial. So one of the areas that I want to look at is within Huperzine. And we know that Huperzine is this natural inhibitor of acetylcholinesterase. And this has been used in Chinese medicine for many, many years. But what they have shown in clinical research is when they give Huperzine, this could actually improve overall clinical assessment in those who have been diagnosed with dementia as well as Alzheimer's disease. And it appears to have this beneficial effect on improving cognitive function, as well as, daily living activities and the clinical assessment with patients who have Alzheimer's. So the fact that it can help to allow the brain for better production and utilization of acetylcholine, that key neurotransmitter, that's where it really does seem to have a lot of its benefit. Now, in the Frontiers in Aging Neuroscience Journal back in 2014, they looked at Huperzine A as being an effective disease-modifying drug for Alzheimer's. So let me mention that title again. An effective disease-modifying drug. And we know that Alzheimer's disease is this progressive neurodegenerative disorder for which, at this point in time, there is still no cure. So they were looking at Huperzine A. They said, we know that this is a natural inhibitor of acetylcholinesterase. And if that can block that and allow for higher levels of the actual neurotransmitter acetylcholine, would this be beneficial? And that's exactly what they were able to find, was that Huperzine not only allowed for better release of acetylcholine, it actually significantly slowed down the course of the neuronal death, or the dying off of the brain cells itself. So they were looking at the different senile plaques and the neurofibrillary tangles that are the hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease, and recognizing just how powerful the Huperzine could be at targeting those different aspects. So in, summarizing their findings, they, walked away with that conclusion that indeed the multiplicity of the actions by Huperzine A as being a highly effective drug, and it potentially could serve as a disease-modifying drug for Alzheimer's. So this just shows you, when you look at a formulation such as Cognition Hx and you see all of the different nutrients that are combined in this, you can say to yourself, okay, now I kind of understand the science behind this, because we're following that science. We're recognizing the way in which, when you take this synergistic blend of these key nutrients, things that are promoting proper energy production in the brain, things that are promoting proper blood flow to the brain, such as that ginkgo, for example, and then having that Huperzine that is very, very targeted towards the pathological processes behind cognitive decline, it really is quite impressive overall. Now, when we look at NADH, I just want to kind of fall back to this, because the Department of Neurology at University of California, San Fran, they were looking at NADH and brain function in brain diseases in the aging brain. And what they were really assessing was that there are so many of these studies out there suggesting that NADH can mediate multiple biological processes, as well as energy metabolism and the mitochondrial function, as well as cell death and aging. And they wanted to see if there was supporting evidence. Is this really playing a significant role when we look at the neurons in the brain? And in their research, they found that NADH was a fundamental mediator in brain function as well as brain senescence, which is, trying to maintain the longevity of those neurons, which we know they start to atrophy and go away as we get older. And so by having that NADH on board in this particular formulation, once again yields that added layer of cognitive support. So when you hear the name of this product, Cognition Hx, one would think, okay, so that's for memory. But now you maybe can walk away with a better understanding as to just why this particular product is so powerful. Having that key phospholipid, that phosphatidylserine, to support the way that cell itself, the neuron in the brain, how that is actually structured. So we're talking about structural and functional support combined in this particular formulation, having the acetyl L-carnitine to help to drive those fatty acids into the cell for that energy production so we can be sharper. Looking at that ginkgo to enhance that blood flow, to make sure we have proper oxygenation at the same time can fend off the oxidative stress. That Huperzine to really help with that downregulation of the acetylcholinesterase, as well as having NADH, that vitamin B3 substrate that we know plays an integral role in maintaining the health of the neurons in the brain. So we all want to be able to age gracefully. The one area that we certainly don't want to overlook is our brain. So taking something such as Cognition Hx gives you a comprehensive way to target many of the common reasons as to why the brain starts to lose its sharpness, focus, as well as that ability to maintain good memory function. So that is all that I have for you for today. I just want to thank you so much for tuning into the Invite Health podcast. Remember, you can find all of our episodes for free wherever you listen to podcasts or by visiting invitehealth.com/podcast. Now, do make sure that you subscribe and you leave us a review. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Invite Health. And we will see you next time for another episode of the Invite Health podcast.